It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Thanks for joining us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante. Hey, folks, let me tell you a little story. Remember back in 2000, 2001, 2002, we had John Rich on the show talking about a liquefaction plant. It was ultra-clean coal. And at that particular point in time, John Rich and his organization were thinking of building a liquefaction plant. This plant is to take all the coal dust and all the dirty hills you saw, to put them and to make gas out of them. And at that particular point in time, we'd be able to, at that time they were projecting a gallon of gas would be about $1.50 if this liquefaction plant was built. Well, through whatever happened with politics, et cetera, the plant was never built. And so what happened is the foreign country, like China, came in, looked at this the operation. They went back to China, and right now I forget how many liquefaction plants they have in China, taking coal and making gas out of it. If we've had those plants today, my prediction would be that we would be paying about $1.50, $1.60 for a gallon of gas, and that's including taxes. Now, why do I say that on my show today? No stranger to us here in northeastern Pennsylvania, Senator John Yudichak from this State Senator John Yudichak from the 14th Senatorial District. So, John, we talked about what happened back then. If you recall, John put millions of his own money in. I mean, this guy really tried his best. Anyway, the state at that particular time did give him a loan guarantee, not a grant, to get it started. Then he went to the federal government. That's where we had some problems. The only honest guy I thought at the time was Senator Santorum. Okay, Rick was, like, reminds me of you, was very honest, and what he said, he did. So with that being said, we now have Atlantic Carbon, and we have coal, and they're using it for the carbon. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I remember that was in the General Assembly in the House of Representatives, and Mr. Rich met with him many times. Actually did your show with Mr. Rich. He had a wonderful idea, incredible investments, turning coal into liquid gas, particularly diesel. Would be tremendous in terms of an economic opportunity for northeastern Pennsylvania. We have anthracite coal, just about all the anthracite coal in the world, billions of tons in reserve. That would have been a smart idea. Unfortunately, the politics and then natural gas coming online in a big way, and the boom in Marcellus Shale kind of knocked that idea out of the box. Now, I've just stepped up and become a co-chairman with Senator Yaw, my counterpart on the Environmental and Energy Committee. He's the chairman. I'm the Democratic chairman of the Environmental and Energy Committee. I've just signed on to be co-chair of the Coal Caucus. So I recognize we need to get smart about coal. Coal, they've invested billions of dollars in terms of clean coal technology, reducing the level of emissions. They've reduced the level of emissions from 1970 to today by 90%. Wow. So that's in those that are, particularly in the bituminous area, putting it into elect generation. Anthracite is not about electric generation. Atlantic Carbon, I think one of the most exciting, innovative coal companies in the world, not just in Pennsylvania, in the world. You know, they have 90 people working, getting good wages, $30 million impact here in the local economy in the greater Hazleton area, and they can only grow. I mean, they're projecting another 100 new jobs. That would be a total economic impact of $60 million. And what they're doing is they're mining coal in the most modern way. And the double benefit we get is the jobs, the economic opportunity in terms of their investment, and the environmental reclamation. They've already reclaimed 100 acres of land. If the taxpayers were required to do that, that would have been $2 million. That $2 million came from Atlantic Carbon in terms of improving the environment. That land goes back to the Commonwealth or to the county or to the local municipality. That's, to me, a double win in terms of the economic development and in terms of environmental reclamation.
So, John, what do you say? Congressman Barletta and I had this conversation about a month ago, and we talked about, the coal, and he says, Sam, you'd be surprised how many people still do not have a good feeling about coal. I mean, he certainly is a strong supporter, as you know, but I guess people were in his travels maybe outside of Harrisburg, et cetera. So what do you say to the naysayers that still feel they think of coal, they think of the dust, they think of everything, all of the bad things? If you were giving a talk, what would you say to them?
First of all coal is not the same. I think that's a misconception for those that don't live and have not been born and raised near the coal fields like we have here in northeastern Pennsylvania. You have bituminous coal and you have anthracite coal. Anthracite is one of the cleanest fossil fuels in the world. It is nearly 90% carbon, and as you see with Atlantic Carbon, it's used for things other than electric generation. It's used in manufacturing, it's used in water filtration, it's used in so many different positive ways. So there's so many uses for anthracite beyond burning it. And then on the second point, I would say, look at the investments that's been made. Look at the progress that's been made on reducing carbon emissions. Coal has invested billions of dollars in making sure they're doing the right environmental thing. We still have, between the waste coal industry and the traditional coal industry, 40,000 Pennsylvanians that go to work every day in the coal industry. That's an enormous economic impact of Pennsylvania. To simply dismiss that because someone in Washington, some urban elitist decides that they don't like coal, when they don't even understand coal and they've never shook the hand of a coal miner, then they don't want to understand that we need to have a balance. We need a balanced portfolio. Right now, 40% of the electric generation in Pennsylvania comes from what industry? Nuclear, and it's emission-free. So we're doing a job. We just in the last 5 years reduced carbon emissions in Pennsylvania by 20%. We're doing the job on the environmental side. There can be a new industry around coal, and people call it clean coal, I call it smart coal. We make smart investments in smart coal in terms of all these other applications in manufacturing silicon and steel, all of those things. Anthracite can play a big role, and Atlantic Carbon right here in Hazleton is playing a big role, a worldwide role in the advancement of anthracite.
Well, we're hoping that, I know the Obama administration put a big halt and regulations, and that caused some problems. The only thing that I couldn't understand is, why, if you're the President of the United States, and believe me, I know what you do, but I'm not in your offices every day. I don't see all of the internal stuff, okay? So I cannot be judgmental, but the point is, with the expertise that we have that would be advising the President, on these, particularly with coal, such as you do. I mean, you work both sides of the aisle, John, you always did. There's nothing going to be accomplished unless you do that. And that's why I said Senator Santorum was the only man who was honest with John Rich, and also honest with the American people. And as a result, he lost the election because they didn't support him, because he was there. That's only my opinion. So hopefully we can move forward on that. Now we have other issues in the state of Pennsylvania. The prison situation. Give our audience a synopsis of the entire thing, what happened here, and where do you think we're going to be going with this?
Last Friday, the governor dropped a bombshell on Pennsylvania. He put out an initiative to examine 5 state prisons and close 2 state prisons by January 26. That's 9 days out. That a decision that could impact 1,000 state workers and impact the communities that support those state institutions to the tune of $100 million loss to their economy. That decision, according to the governor's office, is going to be made in 9 days. Legislators, Democrat and Republican, were all caught off guard. It wasn't part of the budget debate last year. It wasn't part of the budget debate this year. It's been injected into this year's budget debate in a big way. We've argued that any decision should be delayed. Any decision should be suspended. So proper due diligence and public vetting could be in place. Prison population has been reduced. Number of corrections officers and staff has been reduced. And I would argue that there's been no state agency more aggressive in cost cutting. Back in 2012, under the Corbett administration, we passed historic prison reforms. I supported those reforms. Those reforms and those judicial reforms have led to the Department of Corrections saving $142 million in the last 5 years. But what happened when the Corbett administration closed down 2 prisons in 2013, what did you see? A spike in overtime, $90 million. It was a $50 million increase just in overtime costs. You close another 2 prisons, you're going to get another $50 million spike. So the $180 million the governor's looking to save by closing 2 prisons, the math just doesn't add up. You're going to spike overtime costs, and they're arguing that no job will be lost. Well, you take SCI Retreat, $57 million to operate that prison, one of the most efficient in the entire fleet of the state prisons. Well, $47 million of that $57 million is staff salaries and benefits. If no one loses those jobs and they're just shifted to another institution 100 miles away, that doesn't change the corrections budget. You're not going to see enormous savings. So I think I think the governor, this is politically motivated. This is about him repositioning himself in the budget negotiations and saying that he's willing to that he wants to cut prisons, not schools. We're all for schools, but we also recognize there's crime in our streets and in our neighborhoods, and we need to invest in law enforcement. We need to invest in our corrections officers who do an incredibly difficult job. And the last thing that you want to interject into a state prison system is uncertainty and emotion. And now you've manufactured an artificial crisis. And so now thousands of families are wondering, are they going to have a job tomorrow? Are they going to have 100 miles added to their commute? And you have inmates that are wondering, where are they going to be? So that instability is bad for the prison system. I disagree with the governor on this issue. We have a bipartisan regional coalition. My good friend, Representative Neil Goodman, and I are standing arm in arm on this issue. Senator Baker, Senator Orgel, as long as Representative Mowry, Toohill, Representative Coffer, Prashinsky, and Carroll, all working together, recognizing closing Frackville, Waymart, or SEI Retreat, or closing 2 of those prisons will have a devastating impact on the economy in northeastern Pennsylvania that's struggling already with high unemployment, chronic unemployment here in northeastern Pennsylvania. We need to be focused on jobs, and the last thing we need to do is have Harrisburg suck those jobs out of northeastern Pennsylvania.
You know, John, I get very frustrated, as you tell, with the show, and the thing is, people think I'm pro-Republican or pro-Democrat. No, I was Trump for reasons. When you do, does the governor surround himself with people that would go to different guys like senators and representatives and say, look, I want to make a decision here. At least that's what I do when I'm doing stuff with my company. I look at my production house, my advertising, my different areas, and bring them in and say, I want to do this. What would be a repercussion? So when you were saying to me that you guys were shocked to hear that he comes out with this, where does he get this information from? Where does he get the resource? I mean, does he do his homework? I don't know. I'm talking to Senator John Yudichak, folks. Folks, I tell you all the time, when you're voting for people, vote for their qualifications. Don't vote for John Yudichak because he looks good. Vote because the guy has the qualifications. Look, we got in the state of Pennsylvania. We had the most honest governor that I remember, Governor Corbett, in the state of Pennsylvania, did everything that he promised you to do, and we end up with this guy, Wolf. We'll be right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show. Remember, folks, 24/7, you can watch all of the programs we produce at SSP TV, Samson Productions, on ssptv.com. My email is sam@ssptv.com. And remember, Channel 190 in Pottsville, Channel 190 in Lackawanna County, Channel 92, Wilkes-Barre, Kingston, and Mountaintop, and of course, Channel 13 and 513 HD here in Service Electric Cablevision. My guest, Senator John Yudichak, State Senator John Yudichak on the 14th Senatorial District. So I mentioned about Santorum, and I mentioned about Corbett. Okay, so in my estimation, from having them on all the time, they all seem to me, whatever they said, they did.
Well, just to make sure that I have equal time, where I would disagree with you, I think Governor Wolf and Governor Corbett both were good men with good intentions. But where I think they are similar, and what severely has hampered both of their administrations is their failure to engage and work with the General Assembly. Democrat and Republican. Republicans have clear majority, the largest majorities that they've had in a century. They have a veto-proof majority in the Senate, 34 members, and 121 members in the House. The Republicans are in charge of the General Assembly. So what I see is that failure to engage, that failure to understand the regions, the various and diverse regions of Pennsylvania, has shortchanged both of those governors' ability to lead.
Well, like I said, I don't sit where you sit, okay, and I don't think that's right. Okay, I really, in my opinion, I think that if you sit as a governor or anyone, like you too, John, you look at your constituents before you would make a decision as a state senator. I mean, you've always done that, okay? Staying with the prisons, okay, so what do you think, what do you suggest, okay, being that this hit you by surprise, okay? And is the governor, you think the governor will back off, okay, with his decision?
We have not gotten any indication that he is backing off the January 26th deadline. We have, as mentioned, Democrats and Republicans, senators and representatives, in addition to our federal delegation. Congressman Barletta met yesterday with Secretary Wetzel of the Department of Corrections and issued a statement with me calling on the governor to delay his decision. We understand that we have very difficult budget challenges this year, potentially a $3 billion deficit. A major decision like closing 2 prisons and displacing 1,000 workers and having a $100 million impact on a region, that should be done through the public process of the state budget. The governor gives his budget address in February. Then there are 3 weeks of appropriations hearings that will take place, and then we go to battle and finish a budget by June 30. If you want to make a decision on closing a state prison, it should be done in conjunction with the state budget by June 30, not an arbitrary self-imposed deadline in January when you clearly haven't done your due diligence. I was told this week we had a conference call, Representative Mulray and I had a conference call with the Department of Corrections. Part of their criteria for closing down any prisons that they have to meet, that they have to justify, is they have to examine the economic impact on the local community and the county, the host county of that state prison. That meeting wasn't held till yesterday. So the first meeting on an economic impact study is done 9 days out from the time you're making the decision. That tells me you're not prepared to make the best educated decision when it comes to fiscal policy of these closures. It is being politically driven. It's political gamesmanship around the budget. What we are arguing is hit the pause button. We understand and recognize that the state's going to have to make some tough choices, but this should have to be examined through a public process. So we call for a suspension of that decision on January 26th, and we call for public hearings through the budget process.
Well, here again, thinking of the fact that if he's thinking of closing, you know, where do the inmates go? Where do these jobs go? What effect does it have on the thing? I mean, don't you think that he did that due diligence?
In the conference calls and the conversations that I had with the staff of the Department of Corrections, and I should know, Secretary Wetzel was the head of the department in the Corbett administration, and I've built a great relationship with him, and I find him to be a very straightforward and a very effective leader of that agency, and he's been very helpful. But what's clear is this is being driven more from the political side of the administration rather than the Department of Corrections. They are not prepared to make this decision on January 26th. I have no doubt of that. They do not have their numbers. They don't have the economic study. How can you argue to me that closing SEI Retreat is going to save $45 million when $47 million in staff and salary are simply going to be replaced to the next institution? The math doesn't add up.
Well, Senator, let me just tell you, I think there's a lot of things this governor's done already that doesn't make sense to me. I think he's a great person. He has a great personality. I don't think he's the governor that we should have in the state of Pennsylvania. That's my opinion, based on the decisions that we've seen that's affecting thousands of people in the state of Pennsylvania. My question would be is that then when you say it was politically motivated, what do you mean by that?
Well, the governor's given his budget address in February.
Yeah.
And just yesterday we rolled out, here is the governor's new positions on governing Pennsylvania. And it was, we're going to cut prisons, we're going to cut state employees, we're going to cut state leases, and we're going to consolidate technology. Now that's wonderful to have that as part of the budget negotiation, if that's the governor's new direction. If you recall, his first budget, we had a 14-month budget impasse, and schools were in the crosshairs. Schools were the manufactured crisis. Unfortunately, I think somebody in the administration believes this is how you govern and drive the budget discussion, by manufacturing a crisis, whether it's in our schools or in our prisons now, that creates the necessary attention and leverage to drive the budget conversation. I don't believe that's how you govern. Engage Democrats and Republicans in the legislature and drive those policy discussions based on the best information that you have and based on fiscal responsibility. I argue this is fiscal irresponsibility to close 2 prisons down that ultimately, as happened in 2013, we had the case study from the Corbett administration. It was a bad idea. Overtime spiked, and those institutions were mothballed for at least 3 years, costing millions of dollars to have decommissioned, sitting idle, and still costing the taxpayers. That's what will happen at SEI Retreat, Waymart, and Frackville. You decommission those plants, they are going to sit idle for years and cost the taxpayers money.
Have you contacted the governor?
Yes, we've talked with the governor's office and his staff. We've talked with the Department of Corrections. As I mentioned, Congressman Barletta were on the phone yesterday throughout the day and working with the Secretary of Corrections. So we are working with the governor's office, the administration, working with House and Senate members from both parties. As I mentioned, Senator Argel, Senator Baker, and myself are the ones that represent the three state facilities that are on the chopping block. Representative Neil Goodman, a longtime friend of mine, they recognize that it's a devastating impact to Schuylkill County, to Wayne County, to Luzerne County.
What kind of response did you get?
All positive. We're standing, in fact, later today, we're going to have a bipartisan coalition that will meet with the superintendent and senior management staff at SEI Retreat. In addition to all the employees at SEI Retreat, we want them to have the ability to make their case. They're an efficient facility, and they should be allowed to fight for their jobs. That's what I really don't like about a decision that's going to be made, driven more by politics than budgets. The good people, hardworking people in northeastern Pennsylvania deserve their voice to be heard in Harrisburg on this decision.
Well, let me tell you, if I were the governor and I saw guys like you, Argel, and all the names you mentioned before, all these major red flags popping up, I'd take a step back and I'd say, look, let me re-look at this. Let me get all my information that I could. That's what I would do, particularly the fact that you guys are in the field and what you've accomplished. And you mentioned some great people. I'm talking to Senator John Yudichak, folks. Remember what I tell you, folks, look for qualifications. You're putting these people in office. They affect your lives. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Thank you so much for the response we're getting from the show. My email is sam@ssptv.com. My guest today is State Senator John Yudichak from the 14th Senatorial District. So we're going into the budget, and what do we look here for the citizens in the state of Pennsylvania?
It is a daunting task ahead of us. We are, in this current fiscal year, $600 million short. There are a lot of one-time fixes, a lot of gimmicks over the last couple of years that have finally come due. There are significant decisions that lay ahead for the legislature and the governor. The projection is that the next fiscal year could have a $3 billion deficit. Now, what's driving those costs? The big issues driving the cost is pension. And as you know, and I've said on this program before, I voted for pension reform. It's one of the biggest cost drivers, not only for state budgets, but for school district budgets. I mean, you take a school like Greater Hazleton area, their pension payment went from $2 million to $32 million. That's $30 million that's not going into the classroom. That's $30 million additional burden on local taxpayers. We got to fix the pension problem in Pennsylvania. That would be a big cost savings.
Are they working on that, John?
We are working on that. Senator Corman, the Republican leader, along with many good Democrats, have stepped up. That was a bipartisan vote to move that out of the Senate. Unfortunately, it failed in the House, and it failed to get to the governor's desk. Department of Human Services, that is a big cost driver, a significant portion of the budget. One line item in the DHS budget, $3.8 billion is Medicaid capitation. Now, that's 10% of our entire $38 billion budget. They're difficult decisions because you're talking about care to the indigent, care to the elderly, but these are decisions. We have to modernize state government, and corrections is also part of that equation. But as I said, that's been the most aggressive agency, saving $142 million. I can't point to another agency that saved $142 million over the last 5 years. So we need to push government reforms, and look, I support reduction of the state legislature. I certainly want to make sure that we are the most efficient operation that we possibly can. But again, we have to make budget decisions based on fiscal fact, not be driven by politics or ideology, that you like schools and you don't like prisons. We still have to protect the people of Pennsylvania. We have to make sure that their tax dollars are going into the core functions of government, and that is public safety, of course, and job creation, number two.
Do you think, I got about a minute left, do you think things are going to change in terms of economics, in terms of education, in terms of healthcare with the Trump administration?
Well, I'm certainly going to give the new president a chance, and I hope he's successful because America will be successful. So that's how I look at it. That's how I was taught my entire life, not to look at political parties, but hope for the best, not only And I want Governor Wolf to succeed because Pennsylvania will succeed. So I'm hoping that I'm excited about the talk about jobs. So few politicians are talking about jobs. So Washington's now talking about jobs because guess what? You solve budget problems and you solve social problems by investing in jobs.
Well, you're already seeing jobs coming in with Trump, and if Wolf would learn some of Trump's methodologies, maybe you're right, okay? But that's why you are a great senator, and that's why I like you so much, because you've been always honest, and you're not partisan. You work with everybody, and look what happened with you working with Toohill and Barletta, and what's the accomplishments we have. So, Senator, I wish you the best, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you,
Senator John Yudichak, folks. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some normalcy in the state and get people using their heads instead of the political decisions. We'll see you next time.